This recorded session is all on the instructional coaching part of the ECT mentor training. This was developed from feedback from mentors and also due to an internet issue during the catch-up mentor session. You can also watch the full day mentor session via video for any other parts of the ECT mentor day. Okay, so we're now going to look at how the instructional coaching model, which is how the mentor sessions you'll be running, are designed. This is how we will support teachers in moving from theory to practice. We'll start by looking at what instructional coaching is and why we have chosen to use it. Please pause this video at any time if you need to reflect or if you need to go back and watch certain parts. All the videos that I show on here can be found on StepLab. So the programme elements are in two parts. We have the online self-study, which we went through just before the lunchtime session. That's where we have a video and also a think piece that's usually no longer than 2 sides of A4. This is where the knowledge of what looks good is broken down into small, manageable chunks. And we also have the instructional coaching part, which we're going to look at now. So what is instructional coaching? Our aim is to develop the mental models of early career teachers, but we don't just want to stop changing their understanding of teaching. We want this to be translated into a change in their actions, their teaching practice. Change in teacher practice is a change of habit. Any change in habit, therefore, needs consistent, standardized routine and consistent application in order for the change to occur. Now, this process takes time. This induction is giving you the chance to familiarize yourself with a model which, if applied consistently, will lead to a change in teacher practice as the process becomes internalized for both you and the teacher or ECT. So what is instructional coaching? Now, there are a lot of ideas about what coaching is, but Ambition's definition is based on the work of Craft, which uses the following features to define instructional coaching. This definition best fits the model we are using. The first one is individualized to the teacher being developed, reoccurring and happening on a regular basis, and that's why these sessions are weekly, sustained over time. We now know the program is over 2 years. Classroom or practice-based, which means it's maybe context-specific and also focused on specific skills. Now, if you want to read more on instructional coaching, on page 25 and 26 of your workbook, you'll see a blog post by Stephen Farndon, who will give you more information on here. And I suggest you pause and have a read because it's a really good blog post to read. What isn't instructional coaching? Well, it's not led like historic coaching by the teacher. It's led by you as the expert. It's very different to traditional mentoring as before, and it definitely, most certainly, isn't purely reflective coaching or mentoring. And here we just have a quote to understand the evidence base from which coaching has been selected as a core component of the ECT program and why we have chosen instructional coaching rather than a different model. And again, we'll bring up the active ingredients just to remind ourselves what is necessary for something to work and what these are for instructional coaching. We're now going to look at the features of high quality deliberate practice and the impact it can have on practice. So deliberate practice is a key part of the coaching model and a focus of today's session. Teaching is a performance profession. Rehearsing an approach before performing it live can help fluency and confidence. In this context, this type of rehearsal is called deliberate practice. Now, deliberate practice is not mindless repetition. It is purposeful, targeted form of practice in the presence of an expert, yourself, with the aim of improving current performance. While it is a powerful tool for any teacher, there is evidence that it is particularly useful for novice teachers. And deliberate practice is a critical part of the instructional coaching model and therefore the program. You can see the 5 principles of deliberate practice on screen now, and I'll just give you a few moments to have a read of those. We'll also be using action steps within the instructional coaching. An action step is a bite-sized step for improvement. It is observable and specific. For example, it could be stand on the door and greet the children at the start of the lesson, not improve the start of the lesson. For each weekly module, there are 20 to 30 pre-planned action steps on StepLab. They're already done for you. These have been carefully designed to scaffold your teacher's progress towards expertise. They are also scaffolded to support you as a mentor. Each one has a clear and specific success criteria and a set of practice tasks for you to work through with your teacher. And on StepLab, they're already pre-planned, they're scaffolded, they have that success criteria, but you can also edit them. Okay, so we're now going to look at instructional coaching in practice. And throughout this session, there are videos in each section that you can watch and see what a good one looks like. This is where you may pause, you may rewind, fast forward to look at certain sections of the instructional coaching model. So the weekly cycle has 3 components. We've got study, which we've already looked at. We've got observe and select, and we've got feedback. The main part of this session is dedicated to us deliberately practicing the actions of the mentor in the feedback part of the instructional coaching model. This has 2 purposes. First, to build your mental models of what the purpose of each section of the stage is and what it should look like, as well as receiving feedback from someone else about how to improve your execution of each stage. Secondly, it is to build your understanding of what makes deliberate practice effective by using deliberate practice to use your own practice. Now, because this is a video, we can't put you into breakout rooms, unfortunately, but there will be some reflective parts, and also you'll be able to rewind and practice on your own. As always, during any of this, if you do need any support, please contact Ambition at fa1.uk or contact Elliot or myself, Andy, and we'll be able to guide you and give you some more support with any of this. Okay, so we're going to look at a case study. And in this case, we have Leah, who is in her first year as an ECT. Sarah is Leah's mentor. It is her first term and they're working through the behaviour strand. Leah met last week's action step and they're currently working on module B3, instructions. That's something you'll be working on in week 3. So if you did want to see the video of that, you can click onto StepLab and watch Peps, who does the video of week 3 on there. Okay, so we're going to introduce the observe and select phase of the coaching cycle. To minimize workload, this whole process takes place within a 10 to 15 minute lesson observation. During this time, mentors will review the last step and use their professional judgment to decide whether the teacher is meeting the success criteria and can move on, or if they need to repeat the action step. Use the focus from the module to select a new action step and plan the model mentors will use to demonstrate the action step in the coaching meeting. So the logistics here are quite important because you as mentors will drop into 10 to 15 minutes of your teacher's lesson so you can see what action step you may need to select. After that, you'd then be able to meet your teacher, and this is where we will watch some examples of those meetings to review the last step and also select the next step. Okay, so we're going to look at our first example. This is where Sarah is going to meet her teacher, and apologies there, I think the sound just disappeared. So we're going to look at the observe and select video now.
Now I'm going to observe Leah teach. During this time, I need to review Leah's last step, select her new action step, and plan how to model this. Step Lab helps me to do this. The first thing I need to do is review Leah's last step. Last week, her action step was standing where you can see both into and out of the room, greet pupils and make it obvious you are checking their behaviour as they enter by exaggerating your scanning. During the observation, Step Lab will show the success criteria for the action step. I choose whether she has met them. I'll use my judgment to see if Leah is meeting the success criteria and if pupils are paying more attention to the task as a result. If I think that Leah has misunderstood the action step or is struggling to do it, I might decide to repeat it. Overall, it looks like Leah is currently meeting this action step with this class, and I make a note of evidence supporting this. It takes time for teachers to embed changes into their practice, so I'll keep track of this action step into the future. I write in some areas of strength that I've observed. Step Lab will show me what I've written in the meeting. The final part of the review is to plan the questions that I will ask Leah to help build her mental model of the action step. I'm going to use the default question, what impact will achieving this step have on pupil learning? Now I've reviewed the previous action step, I need to select the new action step. To do this, I will need to gather evidence from the lesson, think about how to make sure Leah is aware of what happened in the lesson, and use my information to select the next action step. Remember, before the lesson, I used the module to narrow the focus of how Leah gives instructions. While I watch Leah's lesson, I will focus on her instructions. I can use the evidence that I gather to help me decide on her next action step. I notice that when Leah sets the pupils working on the independent task, some pupils are confused about what to do. So I write this down. To help focus the conversation in the meeting, I write times and suggest the course. These notes will appear in Step Lab in the meeting stage, aiding the discussion. If I want to, I can use this box to write more general notes and then decide on the key parts towards the end of the observation. During the observation, while Leah is already showing many areas of strength, given that she's a month into her first year, I also noticed that the starter activity does not draw upon previous learning or link to the current lesson, and the objectives that Leah shares show that she's been very ambitious for what could be covered in the lesson. While these are important areas of practice, the focus of this week's coaching is instructions. It's important that the instructional coaching session matches up to the content of the module to help Leah embed her new knowledge into practice. Because the programme is designed to cover the whole of the early career framework, these areas will be part of a later module. I also know that switching focus is likely to make an action step less effective. So I stick to the planned focus, instructions. I want to develop Leah's awareness of what's happening in the lesson and show how this might affect learning. I use the default questions, editing the first one to link to what I saw. In the lesson, I noticed that when you ask pupils to complete the independent tasks, some of them seemed confused. What can you tell me about it?
So there we saw an example of the observe and select section, the reviewing the last step. There are some reflection questions on screen now, and if you'd like to pause and read those and reflect on those, this will be really useful for yourselves as mentors. The next step we're going to look at is setting an action step, which is selecting the next step on StepLab. So again, please pay attention to how StepLab supports Sarah in selecting a really precise action step that is aligned to the focus.
My next step is to select an action step. I need to choose a really precise action step, something that's going to be suitable for Leah to practice and receive feedback on and not be too overwhelming. A large change is likely to be difficult for Leah to embed into her practice. StepLab supports me to gradually narrow my focus within the current module B3 instructions. First, I choose a development area based on what Leah needs to focus on. For module B3, these are presence through posture, deliver clear instructions, and presence through voice. Of the three, when in Leah's lesson, I felt that the biggest barrier was delivering clear instructions. If I'm not sure what any of these development areas mean, there are videos available to provide me with an example. Then I narrow my focus based on Leah's needs within this area. I can choose from the teacher delivers instructions that are manageable and sequential. The teacher delivers instructions that detail the specific actions they need to see pupils taking. And the teacher checks pupils know what to do before letting them carry out the instructions. I feel that the teacher delivers instructions that are manageable and sequential is the most important thing for Leah right now.
I've just paused here because it's really important to note here that once you're at this stage where the steps are on StepLab, these are more of a differentiated step for your teacher. On it, you can see how they start at the top and get progressively more difficult for your teacher, depending on how much of an expert they are in that area of the week.
Because this directly addresses a gap in her practice. Finally, I can choose a specific action step. There are always 3 action steps to choose from related to each teaching area. Usually, they increase in complexity. The 3 action steps for this development focus are: state the instructions in the order you need pupils to take them, break down and deliver instructions in manageable steps that are ordered sequentially for pupils, and break down and deliver instructions in manageable steps that are ordered sequentially for pupils, and use a clear start signal so that pupils know when to begin carrying out the instructions. I select break down and deliver instructions in manageable steps that are ordered sequentially for pupils, because I feel that this is the first barrier that she is facing in giving clear instructions, and that she is ready to both break down and order her instructions. I can also see the success criteria on StepLab so that I can double check that this is the right focus for Leah.
As a reminder, this structured approach is used to selection action step to overcome the difficulties of unreliable teacher observation. It's also important to remember that the ECF is an entitlement to a curriculum for all new teachers to the profession. That said, though, StepLab does have a feature to adapt and create action steps, and there is support on this online. So we've now looked at setting an action step. We're now going to have a look at an example of planning the model. This is still part of the observe and select phase. Sarah is doing this during the lesson observation to make efficient use of time.
Before I start to plan my model, I will look at the tasks Leah will use to practice. I'm now going to plan the model that I will share with Leah. This is vital so that she can see what a good example of her action steps looks like, as well as build her mental model of the principles of this week's module. The action step is break down and deliver instructions in manageable steps that are ordered sequentially for pupils. So I need to show Leah a model example of instructions which are broken down and sequenced. Without this, she will struggle to practice. I need to make sure that my model meets the success criteria for the action step. To plan my model, the first thing I need to do is select a point in the lesson when I want to give instructions. Then I will need to script what those instructions will be. Finally, I'll write down what I want to emphasize when modeling. I'm going to plan a model to tell pupils what to do in preparation for a class reading task. This was similar to one of the instructions that Leah struggled with as part of the observation. I give these instructions a lot, and I've thought about sequencing in the past, so it's quick for me to note down what I'll say. When I say go, I want you to silently get out your green pen, ruler, and workbook and place them on the desk. Turn your workbook to page 4. Look towards me so I know you're ready. Okay, off you go. I check that my instructions meet the success criteria of being manageable, broken down, concise, and sequential. The success criteria also state that the model should show a clear and confident voice and relaxed body language. I make a note to remind me to emphasize this. I can also see the practice tasks which show me that Leah will need to script her own version of this, read it aloud, and then deliver it as though she's in a class. StepLab will show me my plan during the meeting as a reminder. I want to support Leah in linking my model to her practice and in thinking about how she might transfer her knowledge of this skill to different areas of her practice. This time, I'm going to use the default questions, although I'm going to edit the second one slightly so that it's where and when else might you use this step, to emphasize the idea of transferring the step to a new context. I'm now ready to meet Leah and give her her feedback.
Okay, so we've now looked at the observe and select section. We're now going to move on to the feedback section. You'll see this is in 4 parts. Review the lesson that was observed, including the previous action step. Model the new action step and analysing the difference between this and the teacher's current practice. Practicing the new action step, and then planning to embed the new action step. Okay, ideally, this would be great if it could take place in the teacher's classroom and have StepLab on your computer, tablet, or phone in front of you, so you can use StepLab to support you with this section. This feedback session takes between 20 and 45 minutes, depending on the complexity of the action step. And of this, the vast majority will be spent on the model and analyse and practice sections. Okay, so as before, we're going to watch some examples of each section. And we're going to start by looking at the feedback stage. Notice that Sarah gives very short but specific feedback on the lesson.
Your previous action step was actively show that you are scanning and monitoring the pupils during the starter activity, which you met, so really well done. I noticed this week you were really actively scanning across the whole class for pupil engagement during the starter. How did achieving this improve pupil learning?
I've noticed, I've been doing it for a while now, and so I think the pupils are getting a bit more used to me scanning and that I'm looking at what they're doing. And I've definitely noticed a lot, a bit less fiddling and avoiding the tasks.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we were hoping for. Setting that standard should really encourage pupils to work independently because you're keeping track of what they're doing and also you're ready to support if needs be. If we look at the success criteria from Step Lab, you were definitely exaggerating your body language, making your scanning really obvious, and you were stood in a position where you could clearly be seen by the whole class. So really well done. In the lesson that I came and observed, I noticed that you asked pupils to complete the independent task, and some of them seemed a bit confused. What can you tell me about it?
I think possibly I wasn't that clear in my instructions. It's quite a complicated task that they were doing with lots of steps in it.
Yeah, exactly. So what was the impact on pupil learning?
Yeah, when they were confused, they just went off task.
And that's definitely not unusual. It's a challenge that all teachers face. So let's think about how we're going to tackle this.
So that was the review section. There is a reflection question here. If you'd like to pause, have a read, and reflect on what you've just watched. Again, in any of this, if you'd like to go back and re-watch, you can do that as this is a video. We're now going to move on to the model and analyze section. So the purpose of this section of the feedback stage is to share the new action step and build the teacher's understanding of what the action step looks like in practice. It is a really critical step as it will ensure that the teacher is clear on what needs to change and what the change should look like. The clearer this is, the more successful the practice will be and the more likely changes will be embedded into classroom practice. We are going to watch Sarah share the action step and provide a model for Leah. These are the characteristics that are key to ensuring that a model is effective and in setting up teachers for effective, deliberate practice. You can pause this to read each one in more detail. Throughout these sections, there is a success criteria in your workbook. This success criteria for the model step is on page 35. We're now going to watch an example of the model step.
So as our module is B3 this week, our action step is to do with breaking down and sequencing instructions. The action step is deliver an instruction that is broken down into manageable steps and ordered sequentially. This is saved for you on Step Lab to refer back to. So let me show you the success criteria on Step Lab before I start so that you know what to look out for in the model. So first, I will show you a model of the whole action step. Then I'll break this down into parts before finally showing you a model of the whole thing again. This is to help draw your attention back to the key features of the model. The model is a set of instructions for what I want pupils to do in order to get ready for a group reading task. When I say go, I want you to silently get out your green pen, ruler, and workbook and place them on the desk. Turn to workbook page 4 and look towards me to let me know that you're ready. Okay? Off you go. So notice that I only asked pupils to do a couple of things, and I broke them down into 3 steps. This made them manageable as well as easy to remember. I also kept my language concise and familiar. So I said get out, not prepare. The instructions were given sequentially in the order I needed pupils to do them. I asked them to get their equipment out first before turning to their workbook. Also, notice how my voice was clear and confident. I said, look towards me to let me know you're ready. This could be heard from the back of the room, but it wasn't shouting. Finally, my posture was open, my shoulders were relaxed, and I was stood up straight. There's a lot to pay attention to there, so let me run it through again. When I say go, I want you to silently take out your green pen, ruler, and workbook and put them on the desk. Turn your workbook to page 4 and then look towards me to let me know you're ready. Okay, off we go.
Okay, the purpose of this section of the meeting is to support the teacher to understand what the difference is between their current practice and what they are aiming for, and how the action step will be of benefit to the teaching and pupils, as well as helping them transfer the knowledge to other areas of their teaching. This is part 2 of Model and Analyse. Again, in your workbook, there is a success criteria on page 38.
Now let's think about the difference between my model and what we saw you deliver in the classroom. How do you currently deliver instructions? And what's the difference between my model and your current practice?
So I think I'd probably give my instructions just slightly more like off the hoof in the moment. I definitely don't think I'm plan them in the way that you did in your model.
Yeah.
And I think definitely a big difference I notice is that you're breaking instructions down really carefully, and I don't think I'm doing that.
Yeah, exactly. So by chunking your instructions, you're giving more bite-sized pieces of information for students to work with, which allows them to process and work through each in turn without becoming overwhelmed. So anything else you noticed? Well, one more thing is that my instructions were sequenced in the order that I wanted students to complete them, so that students can work their way logically through the set of instructions.
Okay, yeah. So I think I'm probably giving them in a bit of a random order, going a bit back and forth, like take things out, be quiet, yeah.
And so I showed you a specific example of this in the model when setting up a group reading task. Where else might you use this action step?
I think definitely the end of the lesson, that can often be a little bit, definitely the end of the lesson. Other main transitions when I'm getting them maybe moving from one place to the other. And probably also when I'm explaining an activity to them.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, any time you're giving instructions to pupils. So when ending a task, or when you want to bring pupils' attention back to you and you want them to concentrate on your instructions. A clear segmentation and a logical order will help them follow, as they can concentrate on each part of the instruction.
So here is some reflection on the Model and Analyse section of the feedback model in instructional coaching. You can pause here to reflect on what you've just seen, or again, rewind and replay any of the examples. We're now going to move on to the practice section. The purpose of this section of the feedback stage is to support your teacher to practice the action step, provide them with feedback and re-practice. One of the biggest mistakes that people that are new to deliberate practice make is not to re-practice. While the number of rounds of practice will depend on how complex the action step is and how well the teacher performs early in the practice, when practicing with novice teachers, we would always say that there should be a minimum of 2 or 3 rounds of practice. The practice will support the teacher to embed the newly developed mental model into their practice. As before, there is a success criteria for this section on page 39. We're now going to watch an example of this.
So now we're going to go on to the practice step. This is really important as it gives you a chance to rehearse the action step, get it right with my guidance before doing it live in the classroom. First, I'm going to give you time to script out a set of instructions. We'll then read through your script together before you practice it in role as if you were in front of your class. Because you would normally stand up to give instructions, I want you to do the same for this practice. I'll then give you some feedback based on the success criteria before you then re-practice. So now it's your turn to come up with a set of instructions that you might frequently use. Remember that they should be manageable, so not too many, broken down into steps, sequential, so in the order that you want them to be followed, and make sure that you use concise and familiar language too. Okay?
So I think the end of my lessons, where they're packing up, can be a bit messy. So that would be, yeah, I'd like to focus on that.
Yeah, great, go for it. We'll review what we come up with.
Okay. So what do I want them to do? I want them to put the books out, stand behind their desks, and I don't want them to be talking. So leave your books on your desk. Actually, it'd be really helpful if they were open. So the classwork, leave your books open. Leave your books on your desk, open to classwork.
Do you need something at the beginning to like signal that you want them to do something?
Yes.
So I said when I say go.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so when I say go, yeah. Otherwise, they don't know I'm giving. Yeah. When I say go, I want you to. When I say go, I want you to leave your books on your desk, open on your classwork, put everything else in your bag. Your bags, and then silently, like you did, like silently stand behind your desks. Simple.
Yeah. And then if you said when I say go, you might need to say, okay, off you go.
Okay.
Great. Yeah, that script does exactly what we're looking for. It's broken down into steps and the instructions are in a really nice logical order. So now you're going to practice delivering the instructions. Remember, you're going to stand at a place in the classroom where the whole class can see you. Keep a nice, open, neutral body language and make sure your voice is clear and confident. You can use your script if you want to.
Okay. Leave your books on your desk, open, things behind, everything in your bag. So when I say go, I want you to put your things out on your desk. That's not what I wanted to say. I want you to leave your books on your desk, sorry. When I say go, I want you to put your desk. When I say go, I want you to put your books on your desk, open to today's work. That would be really helpful. Put everything in your bags, and then silently stand behind your chairs. Okay, off you go.
Yeah, really nice. You stood in a place where the whole class can see you. Your instructions were clearly broken down and sequenced in the order. I did notice that on the first one, you kind of ad-libbed a little bit. You said, like, that will be really helpful.
Yeah.
Try really hard to stick to the script because it's using that concise language.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just re-practice.
Okay, so, no ad-libbing, or less ad-libbing. When I say go, I want you to leave your books on your desk, open to today's work, put everything else in your bags, and then silently stand behind your chairs. Okay, off you go.
Yeah, that was really great. Your instructions were broken down, they were sequenced, you stuck to script, so you used that economy of language, which is really, really great, that concise language. I want you to practice one more time to really build that confidence, really build that fluency.
When I say go, I want you to put your books on your desk, open to today's work, put everything else in your bags, and then silently stand behind your chairs. Okay? Off you go.
Yeah, that was great. Over practicing it, you've got that bit extra amount of experience now, so you know exactly what to do in your classroom. Really well done.
And finally, the last step of the feedback section is the plan for embedding. We're going to watch our final video on the plan for embedding section.
Great, so let's think about how you're going to start to embed this action step into your practice. When are you going to start using it in your teaching, and when can I come and see this action step live in your classroom?
So I can definitely start using it tomorrow with my year sevens. I'll then see them throughout next week, which will give me a chance to practice it. So if you could see me, say next Wednesday, right, at the end of my lesson with my year sevens, that would be really helpful.
Great, I'll come in the last 15 minutes in your lesson next Wednesday, and this will mean that I can see what's happening in the rest of the lesson for the next coaching session, but I'll also be able to see your action step live within your lesson. And that's it now, Leah. Great. Really well done for all your hard work today. And don't forget that this is all on Step Lab, so you can refer back to it if you need to. And I'll see you in your observation next Wednesday.
And that finishes the section on instructional coaching. The final part is reflection and planning, and I've just taken a few of the slides for a little recap on the programme, what your ECT will be learning about, and also support for mentors. So here is just a quick recap on the principles of the programme. This is what your ECT will be learning about. This consists of the weekly courses and also their full day conference. Your ECT does have some pre-learning before you start your weekly instructional coaching and also weekly content, which starts with behaviour in the autumn term. Some questions we sometimes get asked: what if my ECT is already brilliant at something? Here are some ideas that you can support them with. It's always very important to not assume, though. Just because we, as experts, do something automatic doesn't mean that a novice ECT will. So for September, although we've just gone into October, we've only done about 2 weeks though, so still important, this slide. And finally, here is some information on the mentor curriculum. As always, if you do need any support, please contact the Ambition Forwarders 1 hub on ambition@fa1.uk or speak to myself, Andy Doan, or Elliot Costa-Walker, who is the hub lead. Thank you for watching, and I hope it was useful.